Acceptable sacrifice to God. Do we really have to take the heifer, 3 years old, the female goat, 3 years old, and the ram, 3 years old, and cut them in half, laying each half against each other, remembering, of course, not to cut the turtle dove and the young pigeon? Is giving up chocolate or coffee or anything else for that matter for Lent an acceptable sacrifice? Is taking on the time commitment of a new ministry during Lent, or giving up a couple of hours a week to attend the Lent course an acceptable sacrifice for Lent? Do we even need to offer an acceptable sacrifice in order to gain God's favor? Do we have any idea in our own hearts and our own minds what an acceptable sacrifice actually is? Maybe we need to start with the word sacrifice. Often the word seems harsh, gruesome. Our Old Testament and the terrible idea of killing innocent animals appear to be something that brings God pleasure. Yet our simple New Testament Lenten practice of giving up something such as chocolate seems hardly worth when we compare it to what Jesus did and what Jesus gave up as he died on the cross. Even attending the Lent course means giving up, sacrificing time for something else. Yes, I am hopping on the Lent course. I'd like more of you to come. The question is, and it was a very good question raised this last week in the Lent course. Why does it have to be so difficult? Why does it have to be so difficult? Well, dear friends, we live in a world of convenience. Exercising, for example, we have fancy machines. In fact, there's one machine where it just goes and this apparently helps you with dieting. We're always looking for an easy diet. Maybe we're hoping for a windfall that will solve any and all of our financial challenges. These are things that we all desire and hope for. Lord knows that I would love to win the lotto so that I can do a world trip on that boat of mine. The reality is that even an easy exercise program, a simple diet, making money easily requires from us some sort of commitment, some sort of effort. If I want to win the lotto, I actually have to go down to the shop down the road and buy a lotto ticket. Doing things the easy way is almost always more attractive to us than we'd like to admit. More attractive than working hard at something. More appealing than delayed gratification. Working hard has its own rewards, yes. You usually learn that, but it's not a guarantee to success. So a promise of an easier way, as opposed to the sure results, always catches our attention. It's been catching our attention since we discovered that the round thing helps us take logs from one place to another.
I'm going to tell Young to
in the epistle reading today, Paul writes to the church at Philippi about a similar thing. He warns them not to be seduced by promises of an easier way to live the Christian life.
Thank you.
Paul is always, throughout all his letters, very protective of his own understanding of how to live as a Christian. He often warns his followers about those who are false prophets, those who lead others astray. In this letter, Paul warns the people of Philippi, the church of Philippi, again about taking the easy way out. And he uses as his example those he calls enemies of the cross of Christ, who in one way or another allow their minds to be on earthly
Thanks,
things.
Michelle.
He encourages the church of Philippi to stand firm in the Lord and reminds them that our citizenship is of heaven. And then we go back a few thousand years from the Old Testament reading, Abraham, not yet Abraham, is challenged to trust God's promise is true, that the covenant God offers him is indeed true. So far, Abraham has been left wondering and with an O and an A. He's traveled a long way at God's command, and yet the promise has not been fulfilled. He still doesn't have a child. He still doesn't have an heir to his wealth, whatever that was. Yet once again, he's asked to trust. He's asked to believe. And this time, God repeats the promise and formally establishes a covenant with him. And then we turn to the Gospel. You may have noticed that I read from 22 and not 31, because it was important to put the two pieces together, not like the hit. In the Gospel, Jesus speaks of the narrow way,
You want to come
the narrow
under?
door, the
Thank
need
you.
for discipline and faithfulness. Those who question him are looking for answers. Some of them, of course, are legitimate seekers. Others, however, are looking for an easy way, easy answer. This is one of the times throughout the Gospels that Jesus is impatient with the crowd. He is frustrated by their inability to understand. But as we read through that Gospel passage, his impatience later, his impatience and his frustration
Okay, not to
later
worry.
give way to compassion as he weeps over Jerusalem and the people. Dear friends, each of these passages have to do with, remember the words, nice 3 points, covenant, faithfulness, and trust. These 3 passages acknowledge the difficulty and challenge of holding true, of staying faithful. We all want the security of connection, of relationship, of covenant. But such connections require something of us. Relationships are not one-sided, not even
Thank you.
with
Thanks
God.
for that.
Relationship implies that both parties are involved.
Thank you.
But sometimes we get distracted and overwhelmed, or have what we think are higher priorities. Sometimes we're just plain tired, or we think that the other party doesn't care about us, or a whole bunch of other things that draw our attention away from where our attention actually needs to be. Sometimes it is easier to just let ourselves be distracted than to do the things that keep us in relationship, even though ultimately that relationship would nurture us. So making an effort, being disciplined, trusting, being faithful, attentive, even intentional, those things take time. They don't happen just because. They are taking the narrow way. They are difficult, especially in a culture
Thank you.
that
Thank you.
does its best to
Okay,
keep us
no trouble.
distracted and off balance and wanting. And yet, in such a culture, there is nothing we need more than the depth and richness of our relationships with each other, families, friends, loved ones, communities, and ultimately when we cheat ourselves out of these essential life-giving relationships, those who love us suffer. But we are the ones that suffer most of all. We are the ones who lose the most. We cheat ourselves when we take the easy way, when we avoid the narrow way of freedom and integrity and love. Those are the only things that matter. And when we try to live without them, we find that it isn't the abundant life that Jesus promised us. And then it is us that Paul calls to task. It is us that Jesus weeps over. Dear friends, the narrow way is about loving unconditionally, giving unconditionally. It is about opening our hearts completely and stepping to the very edge of the precipice of love and trust. We're afraid to do these things, and rightfully so. The world really doesn't encourage this kind of behavior. It's completely countercultural. After all, our hearts get stepped on. Our hearts may even get broken when we make ourselves so vulnerable. If we're lucky, each one of us have experienced unconditional love as children, but many of us don't really know what true unconditional love looks like. We have never allowed ourselves to be fully vulnerable to that unconditional love. And our children, who may be the only ones we can even come close to loving unconditionally, even they can break our hearts. Even though we know at some level that God's love is unconditional, we still all too often believe that being loved really depends on how worthy we are. So we want some proof, because, of course, we usually believe we are not worthy. So we try to bargain for love, even with God, because we can't understand any other way. It's how we are conditioned to survive. Even Abraham, it's difficult when he's in the transition zone of his life, becoming Abraham, and he's not quite there yet, he's still Abraham. Even Abraham asks, so what's in it for me? It is us, dear friends, that Jesus weeps over, because we don't live into the fullness of God's promises. We don't live into covenant. We're afraid, and we, more often than not, view the way of love as convenient. We believe in scarcity rather than in God's abundance. And we're afraid that there won't be enough for us. We'd rather have a get-rich-quick scheme because it demands less of us. But dear friends, we are called to abandon our fear. We are called to abandon our mistrust. We are called to walk wide-eyed into God's love. That's what Abraham, in some terror, I guess, certainly finally does, even though it seems like he is tested over and over and over again. It's what Paul is talking about when he reminds us that we are citizens in heaven. It is what Jesus weeps for. Tears meant to soften our hardened hearts, to wash away our fear, making room for love to grow.